Bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Agree?
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
This is the greatest show of all time.
Hey now, everybody, and this is episode 169 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your co-host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my rally-attending, high-rolling, shaken but not stirred co-host, Igri. And longtime listeners of the show may remember this voice. Jewel is stopping in to discuss the latest episode of The Last of Us, Episode 6, Kid. I want to start off the show by thanking everyone for joining us lately, because it's not just a podcast anymore. As one of my coworkers put it, it's also a therapy session after every single episode. So neither of you guys were here last week, so I want to throw this to you first, Jules. Let's discuss it. Are you over the Henry and Sam thing? Have you recovered fully?
No, that was devastating to me. And I one of the things I have really been surprised about in this show is how much each episode, you really become entrenched in these people's lives, and you become attached to these people just within the amount of time in this episode. And like you were saying last week, that doesn't usually happen. You usually have a whole season to get to know people, but they've done an outstanding job on connecting people with all of these characters in just one episode and feeling like your heart's been ripped out at the end of each episode, essentially.
Yeah, I agree with you, and thanks for quoting me from the last episode. Way to win points with the host. IG, how about you? I know you were out in Vegas glamming it up, but Henry and Sam, how did you feel about it?
You know, I might have been able to be over it if, like, the entire recap that they showed before wasn't full of it. And then the first scenes in the new episode, Henry and Sam and Henry killing himself. And, like, do they not know how traumatic it is to go through that? I mean, we only had a real short amount of time with them, but they left quite an impression. And you know, I could only imagine what Henry was going through, like to have this kid that he's caring for and then have to kill him because he's infected and he's turned already. And you see how bad this fungus really is because it turned the kid in 12 hours. And that's what happens. And
well,
they just had to hit us with it again. Like we just finished the last episode, buried him, put the little Etch-a-Sketch thing on top of the grave, and then like, hey, you know, just in case you weren't sad again, let's put it right in the front of this episode.
Exactly. And the one thing I noticed last week was, you know, in the episode with Frank, I can't remember the other Bill
and Frank.
Bill and Frank, you know, they died together because it was like, this is my purpose. Bill said, you were my purpose. I have no reason for living. And that was almost the same way last week with Henry. When Sam died, it was like he had to make that split second decision, but it's like, my purpose is over here. So yeah, I have to go.
I can't imagine what is racing through that guy's. I mean, I'm trying to keep the manly veneer because I haven't been married that long, and I'm watching this with my wife, and we watched Wakanda Forever just before that, and you know, I'm already emotionally, worked up, and then they show Henry again, and it's like, oh man, that's just like a kick in the guts. IG, we open the episode with Joel and Ellie invading a lovely Native American couple's home. They're living out in the middle of nowhere. They're just looking for directions. They didn't hurt anybody. But they talk about crossing the river of death. I mean, short of a supply of Reese's peanut butter eggs, like a lifetime supply, is there anything that could get you to cross the river of death?
You know, in this world, maybe there might be a number of things, you know, I mean, do they have the internet back up and running? And yeah, there are things that, it's funny because, I'm old enough to have grown up without a lot of these things, right? No cell phones at all, let alone smartphones. Internet in its very infancy. I remember long ago with dial-up on a 2400 baud modem that you'd wait 5 minutes for a picture to download from somewhere. If they have some real internet, maybe it might be worth crossing. Or quite honestly, like, running water and water heaters might be a really big deal. But even then, like, what else might you have to cross to get to that? Maybe not. I mean, and the other side is they're not starving, right? You don't see them wasting away to nothing and barely able to move anymore because they're so hungry, or they can't find suitable water. So I know that they're going out there for a mission and they're trying to get something that might, quote unquote, save humanity. But I don't know. Maybe you're better off like this old couple living out in the middle of nowhere, just doing your own thing, especially if you know the land and there's enough wildlife out there reproducing to keep yourself going. Maybe it's better to not have.
So I'm going to mark you down for peanut butter, eggs, internet porn, and a hot shower.
Yes.
To cross the river of death. All right. Ellie is strong in her resolve to push forward, even across the ominously named river of death. The woman says, she replies to the woman, "You can't scare us." In which she turns towards Joel's direction and said, "I scared him." Joel showing heavy signs of worry, out of character, at least going forward. And then it looks like he has a mini panic attack. Is this trip starting to wear him down?
Well, it's wearing his shoes down, that's for sure. I don't know how they walked that far. And he only needed a little duct tape. But I was in this episode, I felt like, what's going on with Joel? I mean, he's been so strong up until this point. But I think after that shootout where Ellie had to save him, I think then he started to realize he's not the same anymore. And he doesn't have Tess. And he's her only hope. And if he doesn't get her there, then there is no hope for anybody else. So it's a lot of pressure. And maybe he's really starting to realize how much pressure is actually on his shoulders now.
Maybe he thinks he's an angel of death or something, because everybody that he's entrusted, like, first Tess, now Henry and Sam. And the only thing he's got left is this kid that is, maybe the only way that humanity survives. That's a lot of stress to put on a person.
Absolutely.
Speaking of boots, there was a great meme this week for you Walking Dead fans about Andrew Lincoln and his boots, where they had only had one pair, and he was on the show for about 6 seasons, and he would not wear anything else. There was no casual Rick. He always wore the same pair of boots, so that was pretty cool. As they move across the river towards the next step in their journey, IG, let's take a minute to talk about how absolutely beautiful the show is. I mean, it's been shot after shot. Every scene is more breathtaking than the next. Now, for someone who lives in that general direction, it may not be 10 miles west of Massachusetts, but do you think it fits the bill for the northern Midwest?
Absolutely it does. I mean, and it could be early spring, it could be late fall, it could be any number of times. It's obviously not midwinter, because he's walking around without a hat on, the winds aren't whipping too hard. So I mean, it's starting to warm up, or it's just starting to cool down and they have their first snow. But this show has done a great job with setting up a lot of different looks, right? They had places that, it just looks run down and beat up, and then places like this that look almost untouched by anything. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of people in this country that haven't been much out of where they live. There's a lot of space in this country where there's nothing. There's nobody around for miles.
Yeah.
And it looks just like that. It is beautiful.
Well, the majority of people die within 20 miles of where they were born. They don't move out of the area in which they live. So if you find a person that's been all over the place, they're a rarity. But, your everyday citizen, they really don't move from place to place. They stay in the general direction. Hell, I was mid-40s before I moved 20 miles away from where I was born. A lot of people are like that.
I was in my 40s and moved back. I was living thousands of miles away and moved back.
But the scenery has been breathtaking. During the previews, one of the things that I remember seeing is them crossing the bridge in the snow, the overhead drone shot, and it's just been one shot after the other. I mean, each episode looks better than the next. So that, to my Walking Dead friends, I understand that it's not being filmed in Georgia, and that's a super bummer because everything's filmed in Georgia these days. I'm glad they chose Canada because it really, really is amazing scenery to go around with this very isolated story. Jewel, let me pose this question to you because Ellie posed it to Joe. And, try to have an answer for me, but you have successfully lived through the end of the world, and it's at its rebirth. Someone's pushed the giant reset button in front of you. If you could do anything at all, what would you do?
Oh man, I don't know. If I've been living through the end of the world and been dealing with this hell that they're living in, I'd probably want to take a nice long shower for an entire day.
So peanut butter, corn eggs, and shower. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. I always am thinking about these people like, man, how do you take a shower?
So we have a question from somebody watching, and it says, do you think the zombies are harder to come by in the colder parts? Or do you think it's just they thrive in specific climate?
Well, I think with that, like they explained that in the very first episode with like how a fungus could do all these things, right? And where it's you move the temperature up a couple of degrees in places and all of a sudden it thrives and it does real well. And it just needs to adapt to a little bit warmer to be inside of humans because our temperature is higher than ambient temperature generally most of the time. So cold, like fungus, does not do well, right? I mean, sometimes like corns and things that people get on their feet, people freeze them off, right? Because the cold kills it. So obviously the heat does a little bit better. Like I think that some of the infected might be able to come out in the cold because, they need to have the story move a little bit, but you're not going to have the big swarms of them like they did when they were in Kansas City.
Well, and they covered that in The Walking Dead as well. I mean, the comic book especially, that they were kind of asleep under the snow. They went dormant. And I have a feeling that it would probably be the same with these infected because, they're living, breathing things, and everything slows down in the cold. And not only that, we got to consider, too, where they are in the world. Like you said, not that many people, not that many infected. There wasn't that many people out there to begin with to get sick, and these swarms are going to be much smaller. You'd probably only come across individual people.
I have a quick question for you guys, and this has to do with last week's episode. Can we discuss that big zombie-like one, the big one that came out of the ground? What was it?
It's called a bloater, and they're kind of like the boss mob of all the infected, and they really didn't dig deep into it in the show, but they say it's because of its age that it's gotten bigger.
Okay.
So maybe it's more of an ancient infected from the beginning of the outbreak. But yeah, they're intimidating as hell. I would fight that over a cocaine bear. Sorry, Ryan. And that thing has killed me several times in the game, and it killed her henchman the same way by just grabbing him by the mouth and ripping it open, which just doesn't seem like a pleasant way to die.
Okay, I was confused. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, what do they say? There's 3 levels. There's the runners, the clickers, and the bloaters, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's all I've encountered so far in the game, at least anyway. Joel and Ellie come across a dam, which in the game is of super importance. And somebody wrote an article the other day about them keeping 2 cutscenes, which that's what they kind of are doing. But I'm bummed that they, in the game, they came across Tommy trying to fix the dam with a group of people, and there was a big fight there. So it was kind of cool. But as they're getting close, IG, they get surrounded, and the dog gives them the sniff test. Did you think our heroes might be in a little bit of trouble? There were a lot of guns.
I thought there might be some serious problem there. I thought that was really going to be something like, how do you explain to a bunch of people that are really just trying to keep their own community safe that she's immune, she's been infected for months. I've seen her get bitten. Nothing happens to her. She's fine. But yeah, she's infected. She doesn't turn. How do you explain that to people that are literally just standing there, and they're like, if you come up hot, we're going to kill you. We're just going to do that and move on. We won't even cry about it later. It's no problem for us anymore. I thought that was going to be a problem, and I don't know why it wasn't. Maybe it's because you actually have to have, maybe the dog only smells fungus, right? So it's not as effective as the neck tester that they've used in other places that Fedra's developed. But the dog is able to smell the fungus growing inside of somebody, and she's doesn't really have the fungus like that. Like, she's got a little bit and stuff because it shows on her arm where the initial injury was, but yeah, that must be it, is she doesn't have enough for the dog to go nuts, which I'm glad they didn't, because that would have been a real, I think it might have been a problem to try and explain it, and it would have been like too much plot armor if it went that way.
That's a one-on-one conversation. That's not a mob conversation.
Well,
and
no, I think they would kill her immediately.
Yeah, that Joel wouldn't have got the explanation out of his mouth before the dog was biting her, and then they were lighting him up with those rifles.
Mm-hmm.
Joel's name is recognized, and they are brought back to Fort Jackson. Now, we've all watched The Walking Dead, and this town was locked down. It completely locked down amongst the chaos of the world. I mean, eat your heart out, Alexandria. What were you guys' impressions of Jackson, Wyoming? I mean, would you seek refuge there at the end of the world?
I would. I mean, I was thinking that, like, you have these places like Woodbury or like Alexandria, and they're like so modernized and from what people had been used to, i.e. living in the jail or whatever they had been through in The Walking Dead. And so you're going into a place that feels like home, and for Joel, it feels like home. For Ellie, it's probably nothing that she can even relate to, because she's never had any sort of, experience with this that a viewer knows so far. Maybe it is in the game, but as a viewer, I don't know that she's ever had these experiences in a town. But yeah, I mean, I would want to seek refuge in a community like that, but The Walking Dead tells me it's going to end bad for me.
Yeah, I mean, that couple in the beginning of the show may have had it figured out. If you were self-sufficient and living out in the middle of nowhere, or Frank may have had it figured out. Like, living away from people might be the best way. But we get some great casting in Jackson, because Tommy's wife Maria is played by Rutina Wesley, who played Tara in a show called True Blood, which she was absolutely one of my favorites, and it was good to see her acting again. IG, why is it that Joel seems less than happy about Tommy not only in not need of saving, but happily married with a baby on the way?
I think it just destroys like his plan, right? It's get to Tommy, pair up, get off, continue the mission, and then go off and do your thing with your brother. And Tommy, he shows up, and Tommy doesn't need saving. Tommy doesn't want to leave. Tommy's got his own thing going on. And Tommy, having always been a joiner, now being more of a leader, is something that he wasn't counting on happening. And it's odd, it's almost like watching your own kids grow up. Like, you've done so much for them their whole lives. And I'm going through some of it right now, because my youngest one is just 18, and they're starting to do these things. And sometimes they talk to me. It's like, you still talk to me like I'm a child. I'm like, you are a child. You're 18. You think you know something. And they're like, yeah, but I am 18, so I can do some of these things. And I'm like, granted, but you don't pay rent. So
put them in their placing.
So it just turns into one of those things that, he's used to trying to do things for his brother and dig his brother out of certain problems. And his brother's shown that, like, I can grow on my own. I can make decisions. I can do good things. And he's really part of probably the strongest community he's seen since this pandemic hit the earth, because it's doing better than when he was living in Boston, because that's like some crazed like concentration camp type situation. He ends up in Kansas City, and that's just chaos. This place is actually like a real community. They care about each other.
Well, I think some of his role too is gone. He finds this guy, and now he's an adult. He's responsible. He's headed in the right direction. in the game and in the show, they show Tommy is a little less than forward thinking in the beginning of the show, where he's arguing with him like, no, don't say that. We need this job. Don't get it, don't get us kicked off. So I think Tommy was probably a bit of a screw up and probably a follower. And now he is a leader. And that's a hard juxtaposition to be in as an older brother. Things go less than great between Joel and Tommy after having a drink when Joel doesn't respond well to Tommy becoming a dad, and they part with angry words. Hey, Jules, why is it so, even at the end of the world, why is it so difficult to deal with family?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think, you're still looking at your brother, and there's still always going to be those feelings of like, I want you to listen to me. You're my little brother. Them just seeing each other brings up their whole lives together, even though there's been some missing time. But I think that, for Joel, I think it is distressing that his life is very different than what Joel had envisioned was going to happen once he finally got a hold of his brother. And I think all the time walking and talking with Ellie, and I think he had a whole vision in his head of what was going to happen once he saw him, and it just got blown to pieces in tandem with him starting to have these panic attacks and thinking, well, at least I'm going to have somebody here that's going to be my back me, and I'll have somebody that can help, and I won't have so much pressure on me.
Yeah, I agree. Joel and Tommy mend fences, and he admits Ellie's immunity, and Joel breaks down and admits to Tommy not only he's afraid, but he's scared out of his mind. And fuck if Pedro Pascal can't act. But IG, has running away from Sarah's death all these years finally caught up with Joel?
Again, like I was saying earlier, I think it's just so much, right? And it started with Sarah, right? But now he lost Tess, and then he lost Henry and Sam, and there's been so many other things happening around him. And like anytime he's directly involved in stuff, people die. He's even talking with his brother about how they had to kill people when they were younger, when this started. And, they talk about, like soldiers that have been in a lot of combat and everything, generating that 1,000-yard stare because like things have gone bad that like it just haunts you. And he's acting that very well. And I think he's at that point where he's had so much trauma, so much stress, so many things that have happened to him that it's now very difficult to continue to try and carry on and just complete this mission, especially when there's an out to the mission, when it's like I can leave this on my brother who's now he's had a break, right? Because Joel has just been in the middle of this. He didn't get a break. He's had a whole bunch of people die and a whole bunch of people try and kill him. Mm-hmm. So he can get a break. He can be like, Tommy, you take the kid, finish it off. It's only a couple days ride. I'll go do something else because I need to get away from this. Like, I can't be at fault for more people dying that I'm trying to protect.
Well, not only that, I mean, as much as he's fought Ellie every step of the way of getting close to her and caring about her, it's happening right before his eyes, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Mm-hmm. And that scares him the most, is that he's going to let somebody else down, because it's just been, one person after another that he's lost, and he feels like he's let down. So I kind of understand where he's coming from, but he's starting to feel his age, which, you and I talk about all the time. Things aren't as easy. And I think that he had a partner on most of these runs, whether it be Tommy or whether it be Tess, and that's not there anymore. He's out on his own against the world that's, younger and stronger than he is. He's losing his hearing, and he's carrying a lot of baggage, which is making the trip much heavier for him. Ellie,
I was just I was saying this also, everything that happened with Sarah, everything that's happened in his life up to this point where he's met Ellie, I'm sure it's been chaotic and fight or flight for the last 20 years. You're constantly just in this state of like, I can't die. I got to feed myself. I got to get through. And there's all this chaos. And now he's on this walk with Ellie and obviously for a long time. And so it's like he actually isn't in such a fight or flight moment right now, and he is being a dad again, and like all those feelings that he's had to probably just push away because he didn't have time to really deal with them because he was thrust into a pandemic, and now it's like now he's actually being able to look at them, and it's causing all this his panic attacks and everything.
Well, you can see it even in the upcoming scene. When Sarah's name is said by anybody, he just becomes it's an open nerve. Mm-hmm. It's a clenched fist right away. Don't you bring up my daughter. Mm-hmm. You know, even when Tommy brought her up, he just balled up his fists. He got angry. He can't even have a conversation about it. So it's not surprising that he hasn't healed from this. I mean, Ellie hears Joel's plea to his brother to, naturally, she's hurt by it. I mean, he's trying to hand her off to somebody else who's admittedly someone stronger, more capable, knows the area better. But what does it say, IG, about Ellie's feelings for Joel, that he's admitting that you have a better chance of survival with Tommy, but she chooses him in the end?
Well, what it says is that he's earned her trust. Mm-hmm. You know, he's been through enough, and he's shown the capability of getting through some of these situations, and the position that he's got, he's earned. You know, and that would go a long way in a world like this. You know, I mean, there are very few people that could probably survive outside of any of these communities. Like, if you live in Boston, you should probably stay in Boston unless you have some type of training from some previous life. And quite honestly, like, these people that are living in this town in Jackson should stay there.
Yeah, he's her hero. He's her hero at this point. And, you know, he's a little bit of a broken hero, but he's definitely her hero, and that's why she's picking him. That nobody's going to compare, and he's a proven entity to her as opposed to Tommy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, from the ride to the university or the Firefly lab, I mean, from teaching her how to shoot to discussing his old job to teaching her football, the trip to the university kind of showed them growing closer together, as if maybe he's accepted that their fates are intertwined. I mean, this guy, she's fully trusting and depending on him. So is the world... Do you feel like Joel has finally accepted that her and Ellie's fate is intertwined? Joel?
Yeah, I'm sorry, ask the question again. Do I feel like Joel has finally accepted it?
Yeah, he accepted? I mean, he's opened up to her. He's talking about he's teaching her things. I mean...
Yeah, that's why he's running from her too. And that's why he's like, I don't want this responsibility. I can't lose somebody else. I can't. And whether it's losing her through death or losing her by dropping her off at the Fireflies and not seeing her again, he can't handle that.
I don't think there's any way he just drops her off. There's no way that he's.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Like, what's he supposed to do? Just be like, later?
Yeah, you get to feel the situation, and it's just like, all right, I'm out. I'm going back to Jackson. Now, right. I think they're kind of a team now until one of them isn't around anymore. Mm-hmm. IG, they get to the university, and it's going to the monkeys. The Fireflies are gone. Our heroes are attacked. Joel does his signature move from the game and chokes somebody out. The first one we actually get to see, only to be impaled by a broken bat handle. Is Joel gravely wounded? I mean, they barely get away, but he's gravely wounded. Do you think, your thoughts on the final scene, the episode, and your rating?
You know, that reveal of that bat handle being stuck in his midsection like that was kind of a gut punch. And then to leave us like that, hopefully Ellie's picked up some stuff at Fedra School about how you can treat wounds and injuries and things like that aren't infected type things, because she's obviously had some training about things, and that's what I think they teach in school now. And I think it's really, really, kind of scary for us, because even the previews for the next episode, they don't show anything about Joel. They basically show her back in school. So that kind of scares me a bit, but it also gives me hope, because if they're showing at school, that's we're going to see where she got the skill to keep Joel alive, because I don't think Joel's going to die yet. I think he may at some point in this series, and somebody else takes over that role, or something else happens, or they find more people that are at that point where they are immune to, maybe Ellie's not the only one. It's just a real small minority of people. So it could be any number of things, but that was a really like stressful scene. It wasn't quite as stressful as watching Henry kill Sam, but it was pretty stressful. And this episode was, again, like they're doing it every episode where they have some real beautiful shots. They've got some good music choices. They've got great acting. Like so far, the acting by everybody has been like above par where it needs to be. Everything has been done real well. It was real good seeing Rutina Wesley coming back out of True Blood, seeing her here. I was like, when she showed up on the screen and started talking, I'm like, is that Tara? That was the first thought out of my mind. And I went and had to look it up. I'm like, it is, thank God. Like, because she was so great in True Blood. She's only had a small part here, but she's done real well. And look, everybody in this show so far has been knocking out of the park. I'm really enjoying it, but these cliffhangers, and I know they're going to keep doing it because that's this kind of show. They need to keep cliffhangers because then we're going to sit and talk about it all week and wait for next Sunday. And I can't wait till next Sunday. I'm very excited. I don't think this is the best episode of this season so far, but it is still a very good episode. I'm going to give it a 9. I really enjoyed it.
Jules, same thing. Your thoughts on the final scene, the episode, and your rating?
I agree with Egg. It was a complete gut punch watching that. And, here I was in the beginning of the episode thinking the couple we come across to begin with, I was like, well, great. We're going to like them and they're going to die. I wasn't at all expecting Joel to be the one that we don't know what's happening to him. I felt like the wind was knocked out of me, especially with the last scene, because it's not looking too great for him when he's fallen off the horse and he's just laying there. So I do agree that I think they're giving her backstory to show how she's going to help him. But I was concerned because I was like, he can't leave this show. But I feel like, it could be a Ned Stark thing. Who knows? They haven't had any problems killing anyone else off. But he does seem like he's a hugely integral part of this, the whole show. So it would be my hope that that does not happen, but I guess we will see because I will be tuning in next week. But I would definitely give this episode, I would probably say it was a 9.5 because it was such a gut punch to me to have that happen to him, because I was really connecting with Joel in this episode and his humanity, his humanness, and his ability to show his fears, and he was scared, and his deep concern for Ellie and their relationship that's grown so much. So I was really connecting with him, and that's about when they always kick me. So hopefully this all works out.
Yeah, slight change from the video game. I was thinking, oh, well, maybe he's going to escape getting hurt, but they get in a fight inside the school. He falls off a second-story balcony and gets impaled on a broken railing. And so much worse than the show, but probably a little more conventional to do. But this was another strong show in a very strong season. Other than The Mandalorian or maybe Game of Thrones, I don't think I've given out these highest scores consecutively. Super compelling cliffhanger. It looks like we're going to have to wait about 2 weeks for it to get answered because, like IG said, the whole episode is going to be a flashback next week. I can almost guarantee it. But we're going to get a deeper dive into Ellie, which I kind of really want to see because it looks like some of the stuff takes place in the mall. And we know that she not only gets bit there, but she possibly kills somebody there. So I'm pretty interested in that. Now, only people that play the games know that, and I hope they respect the story enough to keep it to themselves. Spoilers suck, and it's never too late to stop being a dick. But family is hard. You expect more from them, and you usually get a lot less. I myself have a stepbrother that I haven't talked to in 10 years. It sucks. So I can identify with Joel's struggle, not only with Tommy, but Ellie. I mean, they really upped the ante on this episode. It really left me wanting more. I'm going to give it a solid 9. We only got 3 episodes left in the season, kids. So grab your crying towels and let's see how this all plays out. I want to thank my co-hosts. I appreciate you joining me. I want to thank everyone that watched, all your comments, likes, loves, and the support that we've been getting because, this is why we do it. Well, that and it kind of makes me feel important because I wasn't hugged enough as a kid. So we'll be back next week with more Last of Us. Maybe Jules will join us again. Maybe Ryan will pop back up. Who knows? Or maybe IG's dog will just bark the whole time. But you can find us on all the social platforms at Cinik Radio. And you can email us at any questions at Cinik Radio. And until next time, IG.
don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CinicRadio.com. Available for download on iTunes.